Okay, good afternoon, everybody. This is episode number 59. Okay, Michael Boley.
Oof.
Yeah,
You
we had
go.
him. We had him on the show a couple
That's
months
right.
ago. Michael Boley, episode 59. I missed episode 58, but my partner, my friend, my pal, the pride of Greenville, Jersey City, Jerry Calla, was able to sit down with Patricia Trania. Jerry, how you doing today on this Monday afternoon?
Excellent, Jimmy. And you were missed last episode. Patricia was very. It was very nice of her to join us, and I thought we had a nice chat, and we delved into all areas of the Giant roster. It was great to have her on, and I really enjoy her work at si.com, and she has a very nice podcast going, and it was nice to have her on. I mean, Giant optimism is always high, this time of year, but it was really, good to get her perspective on some of the things she saw in the spring workouts. One of them being Dart, Jackson Dart, his ability to be a leader, the way he relates to the team, his teammates. And, in that aspect, things are looking up and, talking about what Russell Wilson has brought and, some different things, Jalen Hyatt. So, we'll see. I mean, it's going to be a very optimistic and very, looked upon preseason. We're about 18 or so, 17 or so days, I believe, away from the start of 16 days away from the start of training camp. And before you know it, it'll get going.
Yeah, well, I mean, first off, excellent job as always, Jerry. And I thought that for Patricia, she's definitely a true professional, like you alluded to, her Brooke. She's been covering the Giants for 30 years, and you figure a woman covering sports. I think it was only 5 or 6 years removed from, I think it was Lisa Olson, who had issues in the New England Patriots locker room. So sometimes people forget. These women reporters that came around were they weren't really looked upon as part of like the media. They were almost looked upon as not part of the media, and then that caused a lot of angst and opened up a lot of eyes as far as coverage for football. So I mean, it was great to see that she and a lot of insight for her. I think the Dart insight was good. Devin Singletary was good. I think the Dable story about the COVID with Joe Shane, he called her up, had the connection there. I thought that was a nice story. So, and we try to get around here and over the past couple of weeks, and credit to you because you're the one that target her, see if she wants to come on, and she always answered my email right away, and then she always said I can't do it then because of this and everything
Right,
else,
right.
but she was able to do it last week. Unfortunately, I wasn't there, but you did an excellent job. So I think that for the Giant community definitely was um, something to get excited for. And I know we always throw cold water on the schedule, but she was a little more optimistic, just kind of being a little more granular and finding things out. The thing with the Kansas City Chiefs, that was pretty interesting about their 7 games. And, who knows? I mean, every season is different, but I
Sure.
thought the episode was excellent. So,
No, thank you. And it was really nice to have her on. Like I said, you get besides talking one of our favorite subjects, which is the Giants. I mean, she's around the team every day,
yeah.
so to get a little more insight into the personality of Dable and Shane, and some of the players. I like the Strahan anecdote that she shared. Seeing him now, and how nice he always was to her, and like she talked about, it's always nice to be remembered. So it was great, great episode for our show.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, and a lot of insight. So, you want to start with the Knicks or the Yankees? Which one do you want to start with? Because
Well, we
you're
have we have two teams that'll really, or have had some issues or have some perplexing things. So I'll let you decide that.
all right. Why don't we start off with Mike Brown with the Knicks, and I guess we'll end up with the Yankees. So Mike Brown's a 32nd head coach for the New York Knicks. Uh, Born 1970. I guess he was raised in Germany. I don't know. I guess a military family, but he was a head coach of the Nigerian national team back in 2020, and I guess they beat the USA team. Always kind of assistant and a lot of stops. He was assistant in '03. Um, 4-time NBA champ, 2-time coach of the year. and also had NBA an '07 Final Four appearance. Against his latest stint was with the Sacramento Kings. I think he broke their drought at like 17 years of making a playoffs. Also instrumental in being around certain coaches. I think his low point was 13-14 when he was with the Cleveland Cavaliers, and he said he learned from his experience with the Warriors and Kings. So Mike Brown era begins. What's your take on Mike Brown with the Knicks?
I think you get that initial sticker shock, which is like the first question: is this an upgrade over Thibodeau? And the answer to that is, their careers somewhat have some, quite a few similarities. Thibodeau came here, he was with two other organizations. He was very successful, didn't win, coach good players. Derrick Rose, MVP year one, didn't win an NBA title. And I think what'll wind up happening and is as we get into this, Mike Brown, out of what was out there and who you were able to interview, and when I say what was out there, Jason Kidd was not available, you know, um, Billy Donovan was not available. Ime Udoka was not available. They're under contract, right? So you can't even say that those guys were available. The Knicks inquired and they were told those guys are not available. They interviewed Jenkins. They interviewed, Dawn Staley, or they had a conversation with Dawn Staley. They had a lot of conversations. John Calipari was another one, and you kind of felt as it was going forward. And once Brown's name got out there, he has I think he's like a point away from having a 60%, 600% winning percentage. Here's one thing when you peel the layers of the sticker shock, because right away, is he better than Thibodeau, right? But the Knicks decided to make a change, okay? They didn't like the way the offense developed, okay? Brown coincidentally was always known as a defensive coach until he got to the Sacramento Kings. When the Kings were playing well, meaning his year one and year two, the two things that really stood out to me, which I think Leon Rose and the Knicks are looking at, is cutting on offense, okay, and passing were two stats that he dominated, or I should say the Kings were high in the league on. And his offense in Sacramento was really a lot different than his previous stops. And I think what the Knicks are looking for, they're bringing in a guy that's won a lot of basketball games, that's coached a lot of personalities, that's been around the block, okay, and they're looking for him to bring his style, if you will, from Sacramento, how he kind of reinvented himself with his offense. And one of those things was the amount of passes, the ball, which led to better ball movement, better spacing, and more cutting, you know, in your offensive sets. They're gonna my take on it, and I know this is probably gonna sound wild for a lot of people, is in theory they're gonna play a little slower. I don't think you're gonna see him looking to really push this thing up and down the floor. I don't want to say it's the old Mike Fratello, walk the ball down the court, feed the ball to the inside, then move it out to the perimeter, that sort of thing. But his offense in Sacramento, what he did there with some young talent is, I think, what the Knicks are looking for. That's number one. Number two, one thing that you heard the Knicks have an issue with is Thibodeau's personality and with the players, or I should say, his personality limited the type of relationship that he could develop with players, and his suggestion from the front office to Thibodeau about him delegating more to the coaching staff. And I know this is not the NFL, but you hear a lot of times in the NBA, oh, well, so and so is the defensive coordinator. of this team, and the NBA has adopted to basically having a quote unquote offensive assistant and a defensive assistant. And, Thibodeau is old school as they come. I think one of the reasons why a lot of people have a respect for him is he wasn't going to change. He coached his way. And in the end, he was not able to win an NBA championship, and they felt that they kind of went the max with him. And there's a lot of things that was suggested to him that he didn't do. Mike Brown, he's known as a player's coach. He gets good grades for all intents purposes in the relationship building of things. But I think what you have to go to is what happened in his brief work at Sacramento, and things did get better from when he arrived, from before he arrived to when he arrived. And those were two stats, or two stats, if you will, two concepts of your offense that really jumped off to me, because the Knicks, a lot of people talk about their defending in the postseason, but offensively, statistically, they actually got worse as the year went on. And now you look at Brown, coming into a situation. He got $40 million over 4 years, so $10 million a year. He's coming in. You talk about a guy coming into a situation that's there for the taking. Indiana's taking a step back. Boston's taking a step back. You look at the Knicks and the Cavs. They're favored to win the East. This team is ready to go. They made two nice pickups. We'll get back to that later. But I think as far the story right now is Mike Brown. And, you want to say he has pressure on him? Absolutely. Number one, this is New York. And number two, the Knicks were 2 games away from the NBA Finals. So, yes, the pressure is on him.
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, that's a lot there, Jerry. And I was thinking about this when they hired him, and different sport. I'm wondering if the similarities are there. 1995, Yankees make it to the playoffs. Showalter gets fired. They bring in Joe Torre, clueless Joe, a journeyman coach, and what is it? Now he's well respected, won 3 championships in 4 years. So, I mean, what do you think about that similarity? An established coach, the right coach at the right time.
I mean, listen, there was no move. I'll never forget this. 1994, I was my first year in college, and 95 when that move was made. After the Yankees were eliminated by the Mariners, and I'll never forget this. I was like, wow. I can't believe they got rid of Showalter. What is Steinbrenner doing? This is just when we get back to the postseason, he's up to his old tricks again. And, you saw you mentioned the clueless Joe. That was the headline in the back pages. He had a horrible experience managing the Mets, although with god-awful rosters. He had a little bit with Bob Horner and the Braves. But overall, he was a guy that managed a lot of games, but wasn't successful. Listen, if that, again, right time, he came in, he knew everybody, when he said it, everybody thought he was out of his mind. He knew how to handle Steinbrenner. He knew how to handle the media. And the one thing that he did is, you look at that first year with Torre, right? The Yankees had a lot of veterans basically playing part-time. Wade Boggs and Charlie Hayes split third base. He managed that. Mariano Duncan. You had Tony Fernandez. There was a lot of different things going on.
Yeah, Leyritz caught. I think Leyritz caught.
I mean, you had Zada, you had Girardi on that team, but tying that in to Mike Brown, the one thing that I'll say jumps out at me, Mike Brown was more successful coming into his situation as Torre was. Hey, listen, I think there's a lot of similarities there, with that because again, we both talked about this. They weren't going to give the job, to a Johnny Bryant, to a guy that really had no experience. They brought in a guy that has coached a lot of NBA basketball. We're not going to get into his playoff record. Probably shouldn't have got fired when he did at Cleveland. That was Dan Gilbert just trying to throw a nice dessert, if you will, at LeBron to try to pacify him. And, replacing Phil Jackson, that was a difficult one. But I think what the Knicks are looking at is they're looking at what he did in Cleveland, what he did with the Lakers, what he did with that experience. And I think what happens is going into Sacramento, like I said earlier, he was known as a defensive-minded coach, the Greg Popovich coaching tree. And again, I think the stint with Steve Kerr with the Warriors, really, really paid dividends. And, the guy has experience. Now, again, coming in, the expectations are high because, listen, the team was 2 games away from the NBA Finals, period. We can't say that over and over again. That's a fact. However, couple that now with 2 games away from the finals, the same team coming back, the core, all your strengths are coming back. You've added to that, and now you have teams that are going to be quote unquote worse. Celtics, Indiana, managing big time injuries. The pressure is on, baby.
Yeah.
So the pressure is on. And, our good friend from work, Jimmy Higgins, said to me, he asked me, what did you think of Mike Brown? And to be honest with you, and this is not belittling what Mike Brown or the move, but really at this point, where else were they going to go?
Yeah.
They weren't going to hire an up and coming assistant. And I think looking what is out there, he was the best candidate. Again, don't tell me Jason Kidd. Jason Kidd was not available. Because if you say to me, well, Jason Kidd was a better candidate, then you could name 20 other coaches that are under contract. Jason Kidd was not available. It wasn't like the Knicks interviewed him and then they chose Mike Brown, or they interviewed Billy Donovan and chose Mike Brown. The candidates that were interviewed, this was the right decision. And there should be optimism based on 2 things: the Joe Torre Yankee analogy and his body of work overall, but specifically what he did with the Kings offensively, because the Knick offense, got stale, and was very, 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 inconsistent. And it's not as, everybody talked about the defense. And I think, the key for him to come in is I don't think him and Brunson are going to have a problem. I don't think he's going to have a problem with any players. Let's.
I mean, look at the players that he coached: LeBron James, Kobe
Yes.
Bryant, Paul Gasol. Talk about the Kings. I mean, he had Sabonis, DeAndre Fox. I mean, he was an all-star. Handling Draymond Green. I mean, you talk about handling personalities. Draymond, Klay Thompson, and Seth Curry. So there's no bigger names in the sport. So I mean, is Brunson on the precipice of being that? Yeah. I mean, if this team brings an NBA championship, I mean, that's what Larry Johnson said when they made it to the finals. He goes, I want to win. And he pointed to Clyde Frazier because he said, because I want to be like him.
Absolutely.
The Yankee, I mean, the Yankee Knicks fan has never forgot that team and forever be old. But I mean, do you think that Mike Brown was always on their radar, or do you think that kind of when they were going through the process that he kind of emerged?
I think that they had him on their radar, but I really think that initially they thought one of those guys was going to be able to wiggle free.
Yeah.
And I think maybe now you get into a situation where now you get Mike Brown. You don't have to worry about compensation, because let's call it what it is. Those things get sloppy. Anytime you ask another team for permission, that guy gets out of his contract. Those deals kind of get sloppy. And, listen, is it sexy? Are they bringing Van Gundy back? No, but, I think what they did or who they spoke to, it's the right hire. I really don't see how you could disagree with that.
Yeah, well, and I agree with you. So, I mean, he's a veteran coach, and especially he'll probably calm the waters because I'm sure in that locker room there were probably people that really liked what Tibbs was doing. But I mean,
Sure.
But I think that he'll be a calming voice.
And with that being said, if in the event that he wins an NBA championship, and I said this about the Jets, I say this about the Jets, why Joe Namath is Joe Namath, why Hernandez, the 86 guys are revered like they are, and you talk about Frazier, Reed, those guys. If Brown was to win, an NBA title with the Knicks, I mean, he if he wins the NBA championship next year, he should retire.
Yeah.
I mean, really. I mean, it's almost like
Yeah.
Ranger fans absolutely hated when Mike Keenan left, right? But you look at it now. I mean, obviously, it was everybody was outraged, but you look at it now. That team, 94 Rangers are revered. Why?
Yeah.
That's why is Messier who in his reputation in New York? It's the same thing.
Yeah, that whole team. I
And
mean,
the longer the Mets, the Jets, the Knicks go without winning, those guys, their star continues to shine even brighter.
well, look at Messi. Messier is still doing games. I mean,
Yeah.
Hernandez is still doing games on SNY. Ron Darlin's still doing games on SNY. I think that's why that's one of the perks of winning in New York.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
you'll never be
Frazier to
forgotten.
this day, Frazier's revered.
Oh yeah, and he's still
You
doing
look at
games.
Frazier now, which is scary. Clyde Frazier's fans, right? Like I never saw him play.
Yeah,
I think his last year in Cleveland, we were like 4 years old. But there's fans that are younger than us, little kids that know who Clyde Frazier is. So
yeah,
winning in New York. But anyway, wrapping it up, I'm looking forward to see how things play out, and I don't think the hire is as bad as people think. He's coming in, and I think he's fully aware of the situation, and there's going to be pressure. It'll be interesting. They lose 2 or 3 games in a row. That'll be his true test on how he handles that adversity, because this is going to be almost like must-see TV for every single game. And God forbid this team loses 3 games in a row. That'll be the test, because everybody right now has the Knicks and the Cavs penciled in, 1-2, 1 or 1A, whatever, in the East. So
yeah. Well, and then not only Knicks fans, it's going to be all NBA fans. I mean, this is definitely going to be the story going forward. OKC winning the championship. I think that's going to be a blip on the radar. The Knicks will be the story
sure.
opening up. And I think for Mike Brown, he really has anything to lose. If he doesn't win, he could say, oh well. If he wins, he's going to be. So it's almost like a win lose. I mean, there's no really downsides for him. I think that
He has nothing but to gain.
Yeah.
What I find interesting though is, so next year he'll be getting $10 million a year, and they'll be paying Thibodeau, $30 million a year. So
so
Nolan still saved up all the cable money apparently.
Yeah. So we'll turn it to the Yankees. They took a major dive. They 3 wins in their last 10 games, and Clark Schmidt needs Tommy John surgery. So I know they got Stroman back, but is this a midpoint slump, a midseason slump going heading into the All-Star break? Or what do you think? I mean, you lost Cole, they lost Schmidt, Stroman's back. I mean, they really only have Rodon and Fried, and after that, I mean, Warren's pitching well, but I mean, after that third starter, it really is. It's really going to be tough. And I guess I guess they brought up Schittler or Shelter or whatever his name is.
Yeah,
crucify his name.
He's going this week. Against the Mariners. Listen, yesterday was game 90. The Yankees really needed that. It would have been. I know it. Our producer Dave and I were talking before we went on the air. I mean, you talk about a must-win on July 6th. I mean, psychologically, they needed that. The Mets went with a committee because their pitching injuries just continue to get worse. The Mets have used 51 pitchers this season, which is the record in Major League Baseball. But yesterday it was a good win. It was a gritty win. Hopefully things can continue. I mean, there is a lot of things going on with this team. We've talked about this. I mean, second base, that's where Jazz needs to return to. You need a third baseman. Goldschmidt has been struggling, but the shortstop, is is really become the story. And I think, you know, that's a microcosm of what's going on, which is that ultimately Brian Cashman and Steinbrenner, put this roster together. And I think this roster is what it is. And I think they got off to a very good start. Some people were playing way above their pay grade, so to speak. Trent Grissom is one. I mean, again, still a good player, still
Yeah.
contributing, but his numbers have come back to reality. Goldschmidt, if you remember, I mean, he was up in the 370s, 360s for the
Yeah,
Yankees.
he shot out of a cannon at the beginning of the year.
He
So I
shot out
mean,
of the cannon. Wells is starting to hit back these last few days, but there's a lot of bad things in Yankee land. And the injuries, yes, we can sit here and we can cry about it, but ultimately, Rodon does nothing to inspire confidence in a big spot in me. I'm sorry. Freed, is money. He's your all-star. But what happens now is, to me, you need a third baseman. You definitely need some, the bullpen is taxed with a capital T. You probably need another reliever. But man, you talk about, again, you look in the paper, you look at the standings, and you're like, is this team really 3 out? Where did this lead go? And it's unbelievable. I mean, they've been the worst team in baseball pretty much, the last month. And there's a lot of components. There's, like I said, there's a lot of bad things. For a while, the pitching was holding up. Yarbrough, every crutch and every Band-Aid, Boone put out there, was
yeah,
working.
it
Just
was
weren't.
working, and we were ready to anoint Brian Cashman, but I mean, it all came crashing down. But also, the Blue Jays overtook them. I think the last time we were up, it was the Tampa Bay Rays. I wasn't too worried about it, but the Blue Jays are they're playing hot. I mean,
Yeah.
they got they got a good young team, and they're 3 games ahead of the Yankees now. So I mean, they're they're definitely on fire. So I mean, they got Springer from the Astros,
They had a
who's
great,
playing well.
series against them.
So and then so they got a nice young team, and they're starting to Vlad Guerrero. I mean, they tied him up for a lot of money, and it's paying off. So and they're going to be somebody to be reckoned with, for the rest
Yeah.
of the season.
And the Yankees, I think what happens is when things are going bad, the one thing that really irks you that they don't do well is there's really no situational hitting. They don't put the ball in play enough. Some of the base running, errors, if you will, mishaps, whatever you want to call them, missing cutoff men. I mean, it's like, but it's been a bizarre season, and ultimately, what happens, right? You trade for a third baseman. The rotation, they're probably going to get maybe one starter. They're not going to get. I don't think they're going to go for 2 starters. They'll call up somebody. You'll see this kid pitching. I believe he's pitching Wednesday. But I mean, you talk about things coming, in all facets of the game. Breaking in all facets of the game. It's been unbelievable. But again, the manager didn't put the roster together. The manager's doing the best he can. I mean, I think you're realizing, you're going to have Volpe is just going to, he has these things every year. You want to call it a malaise or whatever. I mean, his fielding has been, has been a lot to be desired this year. He almost took Judge out the other day. That was probably
Yeah,
the most accurate throw he had all year.
yeah,
And it's just a lot of bad baseball has been happening over this last month, and ultimately it's a veteran team, and a lot of vets on that team. I mean, you look at even yesterday. I mean, Bellinger makes that I don't even want to say shoestring catch. He makes that catch probably off less than an inch off the blade of grass. That ball gets by him. It's probably a tie game, but the Yankees actually got a break. He made the play, was able to double off Lindor, and it was. I can't believe we're saying this, but in Game 90, that was a must win. Going into the day off, they have Seattle. let's hopefully they can get some momentum heading into the All-Star break.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is, the only really consistency they have has been Judge. I mean, the team has been inconsistent, and then and then I guess Volpe's dad was getting into it with
I
some Met
saw that.
fans. So, I mean, I haven't really delved too much into it because I was like, what, but you know, interesting times. But they're still right there. But I mean, dropping two to the Blue Jays that hurt. And like I said, yesterday's game, they definitely had to win, especially just for what it means too. I mean, in MetLife, I mean they definitely got it. So it was a good win, but we'll see what happens. I don't know, but
Yeah,
it's
I mean,
gonna.
again, what I think in Yankee land, the glass is always a little more full than it is empty. Even though us in the media and fans as well, us as fans, the panic is setting in. Last year they really came on at the end. But right now you really look at it, I think people just really aren't inspired, by the number of arms they have, who can you trust going down the stretch? I mean, thank God. And I don't mean to make this, or make this bigger than it is, but I was so happy for Williams getting the save yesterday, having a
Yep.
1-2-3 inning.
Yeah.
That was huge for him because again, Weaver's struggling. He's pitching well. I mean, and I just think though, like, you talk about it, the thing I like about Boone is, he's never going to let you see him sweat. He's pretty even keeled in every press conference and every time he does an interview. But last year, you had Soto, you had Judge, and I think even on your worst day, you just reverted back to those two guys. That kind of inspired you. The pitching staff was a little bit better, and yes, they're still in the thick of things. But I think last year they really finished strong, and you look at Goldschmidt. Nobody expected him to get off to the start he did because he finished so poorly last year. So maybe he gets off to a good start, has a little bit of a malaise in the middle, and finishes strong at the end. But
Yeah, well, I mean, he's an older player, so I mean, but he's also an MVP, so I think he knows how to
yeah,
take care of his body, and he's been through this before. I mean, he still deserves deserves a chance to play. So I mean, remains to be seen. But would you watch the All Star game? Are
yeah.
you an
Well,
All Star?
I always watch the All-Star game. I still watch it with my son and my dad. It's one of my favorite All-Star games in all of sports. Now, don't get me wrong, it's lost to me, it's lost a little luster. I
Yeah,
mean, because you got interleague play. Like it was always we've talked about this. Like as a kid, you're like, oh, I can't wait to see Gooden or Mattingly face Gooden and Nolan Ryan face Wade Bob, so on and so forth. But the All-Star game is still it's the Midsummer Classic. I mean,
yeah,
it's still it's still a big deal, and I still think it's one of the better All-Star games in all of professional sports because the NBA is like a very bad. I don't even want to say it's like a pickup basketball game. It's like it's like a faculty versus the students game. I mean, it's just everybody's trying to stay out of their way.
well,
The
only
NFL
thing
the
only thing I'll
NFL
say.
is used to a flag football game.
Well, I think the NBA the last 2 years, they got their teeth kicked in by the NHL. I mean, they had the Winter Classic at MetLife 2 years ago with Rangers playing one game and the Devils playing the other game, which were two competitive games. And this year they had the four countries. So I mean,
Right.
you watch the first 5 minutes of the USA Canada game. Any person who's not a hockey fan is going to be a hockey fan. So the last 2 years, and the NHL, I don't know what the ratings were, but I'm sure it was better than the NBA. But it definitely beat the NBA All Star game.
Absolutely. And again, you talk about that, you could look back interviews, Isaiah, Bird, they used to say, we couldn't stand each other, but when they got in that locker room, it was like, we got to beat the West. And
Yeah,
you look back at those games. I mean, those, as the All-Star game in the 80s, I mean, you always had somebody coming out of the woodwork, having a good game, like Tom Chambers the one year, but those games were just, I mean, the NBA All-Star game has a lot to be desired.
yeah, they got
Matter of
a
fact, All-Star weekend has a lot
yeah.
to be desired.
They're gonna do something about that.
Yeah,
But
you get 47 chances, to dunk a
yeah,
basketball. I mean, it's just bad. But
yeah. There's
anyway,
no
staying on topic. You know, we come in, hopefully yesterday's, not being swept by the Mets, taking game 3 of the series. You got Seattle coming up, then the Cubs, I believe. So get a little bit of mojo heading into the All-Star break, get some rest, and then you go from there. And we could guarantee you that, Cashman will be making some moves.
I mean, they're going to have to make some moves. I know Hal Steinbrenner is not George Steinbrenner, but I mean, but still, still the Yankees. But
Well,
did you watch?
if that was the case, and I wouldn't rule this out, somebody might get fired.
Did you watch the USA Mexico?
I saw most of it, particularly the second half. Very disappointing result. It was a weird vibe after the game. You're on U.S. soil, obviously a very pro-Mexico crowd, which is to be expected. I'll go with Landon Donovan's take on this. Landon Donovan is my favorite U.S. born player. He said,
great announcer too,
and I think he's really, really developed. And I think that was a good crew you saw. Pre, post, and halftime. Alexei Lalas wearing his nice cowboy hat. Mo Adu and Donovan. One thing I'll say, and I think it kind of irks them, and this is leading into my comment. Donovan said this was basically Mexico's World Cup team versus our B team. And if you looked at, and I actually pointed this out, I was watching the game. Some members of my family were in and out of the room. You looked at that result, Mexico winning 2-1, and that's the case, right? U.S., there's a lot of players that probably will not be on the World Cup roster. How dejected Landon Donovan, Maurice Adu, and Alexei Lalas looked by that result. And then the three of them individually and collectively spoke about how disappointing and how upsetting it is, because those three guys really, really, really are, national team players. They really, 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 blood, sweat, and tears for the flag, for the country, for the national team.
Yeah.
A lot of guys chose to sit this one out, and it irked a lot of the old-time players. And, let's just say the U.S. has their work cut out for them next year in the World Cup.
Well, the other thing was that those players were fighting for an opportunity to play overseas or play, but now it's looked upon. Look at Pulisic. Not to knock him. I'm not saying anything of him, but he's one of the best players USA's ever produced. So, but anyway, Jerry, I think
again though, that's the thing. I mean, you look at there's a lot of different. This is one topic that can go a lot of different ways. But the three gentlemen that I referenced that were the in-studio hosts would never, ever, ever turn away an opportunity to represent their country. And I don't know why that is now even an issue, because it does not happen. Let me just say this, and I don't want to get political. If Portugal asks Ronaldo to play whatever or call him up, he's not saying no, period. No matter what the circumstance is. Why this is so passé, if you will, in the United States, I don't know. However, and this goes to what my last point on this, the coach criticized the fans after the game, saying, it'd be nice to play in this atmosphere in the World Cup in front of a pro-USA crowd. Right now, there is a disconnect with the United States fan base and the United States national team. And I think there's nobody to blame but the United States Soccer Federation for a lot of different reasons. And these players chose not to play. People are not going to come out to support a B team for what they charge for tickets. I mean, I know that's I'm making that an issue, but moreover, there is a disconnect. And again, like I said, Donovan, if you remember, was kept off the roster.
Yeah.
his last opportunity to play a World Cup. Those type of guys, right? The reason why they're revered is they bled for the United States badge on that jersey in any international competition, friendly, Gold Cup, World Cup, whatever, period.
All right. Well, I mean, I know we're getting up to it, but I mean, with that, do you think that the new athlete has more to lose and playing for USA is not important anymore? Because I even seen it in tennis when they talk about the U.S. Open. There was a tennis player, and John McEnroe was talking to him, saying, "Hey, you got to win it for the USA." He goes, "Well, that's not really important to me." And he's like, "What? What? You're talking about a guy, you know, winning the U.S. Open like John McEnroe." So you think like even look at like the Olympics with the USA basketball. You think that this brand of athlete, this is not the playing for the country is not important for him in the United States.
Yes, and what bothers me, and I said it earlier, because we've had plenty of people turn down the Olympics, in hoops. This doesn't happen in any other country.
Yeah, yeah, very true.
Again, you look at Italian Americans in I'll speak of the North Jersey area because that's what I know. There's more Italian Americans, myself included, that are more interested in what the Italian national team is doing and it's sad, than the United States national team. There's a very big disconnect, and a lot of it is on the U.S. Soccer Federation. There's a
But
lot
they
going
but they
on.
did USA Soccer did have that. They just lost it. There was, when you had Dempsey on the team, you had some big names and Yedlin. I mean, they had big names on the team. I was watching it. And they had MLS Soccer. So I don't know. I mean, but I agree with you. I think soccer in the United States has lost the mojo, like where it was. So
Well, I mean, we're speaking for the national team. The national team has its problems, and the thing is, what bothers me, and it comes back to that, like you just mentioned, Clint Dempsey. Clint Dempsey was not turning down an opportunity. Again, NBA players have turned down an opportunity to go to the Olympics to represent their country. This does not happen. Maybe we need to do a show on this. This does not happen in other countries.
yeah, well, I mean, even going back to Clint Dempsey, I remember when he got taken out of a USA game, he was so irate, and I forget who the coach was, but he said, "Why are you taking me out, coach?" I mean, talking about a guy playing for the national team. I mean, listen, he was such a competitor, but
He played
they
with a chip.
lost it. Yeah. So, but anyway, I think we're up against it. But this is episode number 59. Michael Boley. If you want to catch our Michael Boley episode, it's 37. But Jerry, I'll pass it along to you. But before that, I got to give a homage to our producer, Dave Sturcio. And don't forget, next Tuesday, War at the Shore. Tickets are selling fast. He's on social media, so tickets are selling fast. I think it's going to be a better event than War of the Shore 1, which was last year. War of the Shore 2 is going to be next Tuesday. So it's up against it. But I'll pass it along to you, Jerry. Why don't you take this episode out, 59?
Well, see, Jimmy, real quick, this is why I have to do the show with you because you pulled me in. I was starting to get crazy on my USA soccer rant. So that's why we have you here to control me. But anyway, like Jimmy said, episode 59 in the books. We look forward to episode 60, and we wish Dave Sturcio, our producer, all the best next week with his big wrestling event. Check it out on our social media platform. Everybody, have a great day, and we'll catch you soon for episode 60. Take care.
Take care, Jerry.